you both believed in your own abilities, but you know what you don't know, and you're saying, look, I believe in my ability to do video marketing, or I believe in my ability to run a shop floor. If I had the right partner behind me, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm betting that I can be successful, like you said.
Worst case scenario, you get pushed out in a good way, hopefully.
I'm not a gambling person, but with a business, calculated risk is always a thing that you have to, be aware of. It's just inherent in the process. I had to look at it from a standpoint of, okay, if we do this with the business, and this is the person or the company that's going to acquire, what's the upside? And just like any other investment, there's two avenues to take there. You either get in low or you get in early. Then you realize the scale of it, and it's like, wow, if we really do progress with this as Nix as a whole, we're getting in at the very low level, which means there's a tremendous upside to this.
Welcome to Making Sparks, the podcast where we ignite your passion for metal fabrication and fuel your business success. Join industry leaders and dive deep into the world of metalworking. From business insights to tips of the trade, Making Sparks is your forge of knowledge. During each episode, discover success stories, innovative solutions, and expert interviews that light the path to business growth. Subscribe today and grow and improve your company, and let's make sparks fly together.
Do you go to the dentist next door? You just walk right out,
I actually don't go to that dentist.
I just don't go to the dentist. I haven't been in 4 or 5 years, and you know what? Haven't had any problems.
I didn't go in college, and then I went.
You don't even get your teeth cleaned?
I went.
I just cleaned myself.
I didn't go in college, and I went, and I had a whole bunch of cavities. So I was like, all right, I guess I'm not doing that again. And ever since I started going to one in North Park in Evansville, I haven't had a cavity since then. Since I started going to him. So
everybody I talk to never has any problems until they go get their teeth cleaned, and then
I feel like I like my teeth. Like I like having them occasionally. Okay. Anyway, we were rolling that whole time. So I'm watching Mason put in. Matthew doesn't go to the dentist, and everybody's like, "He's got good-looking teeth for not going to the dentist."
Could use a little whitening.
Yeah, ditto. Basically, remind me, make sure you're recording, which was the third time I checked that camera to make sure it was recording. But all right, here we go. Welcome back to Making Sparks. I'm your host, Casey Velker, sitting here with my co-host, Matthew Nix, in person for the first time in I think at least 3 or 4 months, probably since right after FabTech.
It's nice to all be here together.
And it's because we had someone who drove 2 hours to come be in person. Who do we have as our guest today, Matthew?
Yeah, today's guest is Parker Huncilman, and he is going to talk to us about his experience with mergers and acquisitions. And I do have to preface before we start here, in all honesty, Nick's companies did work with Parker to acquire his business. So I'm not paying him to say anything that he said here today, but we do both have a similar vested interest. But no, all joking aside, and in the beginning of the episode here, we're going to talk more about his family's experience leading up to the acquisition process. It really didn't have anything to do with us. So if he bullshits you at all, it'll only be in the second part when we're involved. And no, I think he'll be honest. I know Parker well. I think he'll be honest about his experience. So, we've talked about mergers and acquisitions a few times on the podcast, and folks that have followed Nix's story know that we've done quite a few of them. We've actually done 8 in the last 10 years. But I thought it would be really fun to hear from someone on the other side, of the selling side. So anyways, without further ado, we've got Parker Huncilman with us this morning.
Good morning.
So fun fact, the very first time I went over to Huntsman to film some videos, I did an interview with Parker, and no one's ever seen it. And he actually talked about the merger in the interview. No one's ever seen it. Did you know that?
What do you mean no one's seen it?
No one's ever seen it. We didn't use it for anything.
Well, no one's going to see it if you don't use it.
Well, we did his little spotlight thing, and Mason had to go do a new interview because he wanted to be all about controlling it. Mason's our editor, and he likes to control everything.
We'll have to dig into the archives and check that out.
It was good stuff, too.
I have one question for you, Casey. Is this your AI self here today, or do we have to poke you to see if you're real?
I am a robot.
So you're here in person?
I'm actually Cody, his twin.
Okay.
Just kidding. I am Casey. Cody's a lot meaner than me. So Parker, tell us a little bit about your guys' family, leading up to him. Actually, first give a little background of who Huncilman is, and then maybe if that naturally goes into when you guys decided, to start maybe looking at merging with someone, or how that process went.
Yeah, there's one fact that I think is extremely relevant to point out. That's how long you guys have been around.
Yeah. So 1913 is when the business incorporated. And I was joking with Matthew recently. We found a photo through a common business owner in our area that gave me a photo, and I had a historian look back at that, and he dated it to where it had Huncilman written on a street sign, and he dated it back to 1893 and 1896. So I told Matthew, well, Huncilman was actually in fact older than Nix. So, but no, we incorporated officially in 1913 in New Albany, Indiana. We're a sheet and plate metal fabrication company. We've always been in that realm. It started as more of a tin shop, building gas lanterns and componentry to that industry, and progressed over the years into the 5th generation, which I am now actively operating the business. We got heavier as the generations came upon us. So my great-great-great-grandfather, again, tin shop. As it progressed, we got into more componentry-based fabrication for the automotive markets. And our thicknesses or capabilities just got heavier as the days progressed. And now we are I would say a mild to light sheet and plate fabrication company servicing hundreds of different industries from a component standpoint.
And obviously, I think not only how old they are, but it's kind of cool that he's a 5th generation and Nix is a 5th generation.
Yeah. In fact, we, as we were leading up to making the announcement of so let's also clarify here. It's a merger in the sense that Parker joined forces with Nix to buy his dad and uncle out. So Parker didn't have any ownership prior to the acquisition. So today we have a new entity, and that new entity is jointly owned by Nix Companies and Parker Huncilman. So together we acquired the business from 4th
I
generation.
couldn't imagine being partnered with Nix Companies.
Casey knows a thing or two about that. But anyways, I say that because, we refer to it as a merger. And so we went actually to the Secretary of State in Indiana and did our due diligence. And the best we could tell, there's never been 2 5th generation businesses join forces in that way in a merger acquisition in the state of Indiana. Certainly not in our industry. So that was a really cool, fun fact.
Hey guys, it's Nick from Making Chips. I want to give you 3 quick reasons why you should check out Mike Payne's podcast, By the Numbers. Mike, my good buddy, my partner on Making Chips, is full of wisdom. He's full of experience. He's full of what it takes to buy, sell, and lead a business, specifically a manufacturing business. So all the numbers that you should be focused on to improve your performance, that's what he's the master at. The second reason, Mike's the first person I call. If I'm looking at a new idea, a new partnership opportunity, a new acquisition, any new initiative where I need to dive into the numbers and figure out how to approach it, Mike is who I go to. And third, you got to love that buttery Tulsa King voice that Mike rocks. It just soothes your soul. It gives you the confidence to elevate your leadership. Jokes aside, if you love making chips, or if you're just passionate about improving your business performance and the financial performance of your company, check out By the Numbers by Making Chips, hosted by my good buddy, Mike Payne.
Obviously, the second part of my question earlier is, what were you kind of already alluded a little bit to why the merger happened. What was going through your guys' minds over at Huncilman as you guys were, when did you even start thinking like, oh, this might be something that we could do?
It was several years before the deal actually came to fruition. Actually, once it started to progress, my uncle actually, he hit the nail on the head. And I hadn't heard him say this before, and you guys have heard this. He stated that, a succession plan for Huncilman was you work until you're dead. And, I didn't want that for them. And of course, I don't want that for me either. I want them to enjoy their retirement. And, they were of the age. And, in all honesty, our business was stunted. We needed progression. We needed a new platform for growth. And, that's where we were. Our business was successful. It could have continued on. I could have, bridged the gap and taken, sole ownership, and me financially, I just didn't see that as a play that I wanted to make, diving all in for myself. So that's essentially where we came across the idea of, okay, what are we going to do with the business? And it wasn't necessarily that we wanted to sell the business outright, but we were going to look at it as an option of let's take it out there and see what comes back. And in my mind, we found the perfect solution with Nick's companies, because it was a shoe-in fit for us. There's plenty of people out there buying businesses. We buy houses, the signs you see on the side of the road. Well, there's people out there that do that with businesses as well. And there's a lot of garbage to sift through. In the process of doing this, Matthew referenced at one point in time, the last thing he would like to see or wanted to see was, outside private equity coming into our market and buying businesses, good, solid foundations up, and, either turning and burning them or using them for what they're worth and then getting rid of them, or, not letting them prosper. So when we found the opportunity with Matthew and his company, that's where the start of our transition really came to pass.
Yeah.
I want to take a step back. You mentioned something I think could be relevant for a lot of our audience. So, your dad and uncle are looking to retire, and so they're more or less looking for a way out. And I'm sure the conversation was had about, Parker, do you just want to buy the whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm assuming that was had because you've mentioned it a time or two. And you talked about not wanting to take that on, but what you shared with me is it wasn't just about you not wanting to take on the personal risk. You also didn't want the family's, wealth that they had generated, which is all tied up in the family business. It's very common for families. Like families that work really hard and do things right for a long time generate a decent or significant amount of wealth oftentimes, but it's almost all tied up in that business. And so in order to ever really, of course, you have a great lifestyle running a business. I'm not saying you don't, but in terms of really extracting that liquidity event or the wealth out, that means there needs to be a transaction that has to take place. And so you're either going to go to the bank, borrow all the money, which gives your dad and uncle an instant liquidity event, assuming you can go get the money borrowed, which sometimes is difficult to do for younger guys. I know I wouldn't have been able to do that personally. Or the family has to finance it to you, which means the family's now taking on all the risk, right? So it's either the generation that's exiting is taking on all the risk, or the generation that's coming in is taking on all the risk. And so for a family that's worked really hard for 4 generations and going on 5, that's a big decision, especially as the company grows and the dollar sizes are more significant. So I just think that's something relevant to point out. And I know you shared that with me. Do you want to kind of expand on that at all?
And I've said it, the Huncilman, back to what you said, there was some discussion as to me buying the business outright or not. Huncilmans were stubborn people. And actually, there was not that conversation.
Okay.
I think it came out from me more so being not upset, but just frustrated with where we were with the business. And, we need the fresh start, and so on and so forth. So that's where we came to common ground as to where we were going to find that solution. But anyways, back to the financial piece of it, you're absolutely right. And I've said again, we've been tied financially as a family to this business since 1913. And, what makes me rest easy at night whenever I lay my head down is to mitigate risk. Businesses are hard to manage. There's a lot of risk inherently in just the day-to-day operations. So, how do I find a partner per se in that shares like values and like kind of management to be able to alleviate some of that stress and be able to grow it, from a like standpoint. And that's exactly one of the key points in doing what we did with our business from my perspective. And one of my goals was to do that.
Yeah.
What was your role before the merger? Obviously, he's the managing partner now, right? At Huncilman. And so I think for our listeners, like to hear like what you were doing, they may be like, wait, that's where I'm at, either with their family business or with maybe a business that they're just the right-hand man at the business or something, and that there's a possibility. Like I think the goal, again, Matthew can always correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal with this podcast is when people listen to it is to inspire them to take action, to do something in the metal fabrication, and be a leader.
Informing and or inspiring.
Yeah,
sure.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and some of that is 100%. If someone's like, man, I feel like I should be running my own business, how do I do that? And most of the time they may think that they have to leave the place they're doing so they don't have a conflict of interest and go start their own business eventually or whatever. That's kind of how I was. I left to go start a business vaguely that way. What I've learned, especially, working with Nick's for a long time, is that you don't have, like, you could actually get ownership into a business that you're already running. And so basically my question to you is, first off, like, what was your role before? So that maybe if our listeners are like, wait, that's kind of
so before it was not unlike what it truly is now. A lot of things are changing and progressing, but prior to, I was at the pulse of the business, operations management to its core.
You were your title was plant manager.
Plant manager, yeah.
Yeah, which really the only difference was your dad and uncle were handling a lot of the back office sales and administrative things.
Exactly.
And you were mostly operations.
Yeah. So, historically in my career with the business, all the way back to when I started, when I was 13, I started sweeping offices, working my way through operations from welding, fabricating, everything else. And, that, as an aside, I mean, that's what's kept me in this business, is because, I like the craft side of it. I have my own little metal shop at home that I enjoy doing this with, or enjoy fabricating just in general. So that was the stick for me. And then it was, okay, how do you make the business progress around that? So, I basically worked my way up through the ranks. Some individuals that, I started at 13 with still work for our company, believe it or not. So I progressed from there. We had a plant manager at the time, which was 15 years ago now. He was a prior business owner, successful, did a lot of work with us, and he came on board as plant manager. However, he was at the end of his career too. He wanted to retire. He spent 4 years with us. When he put in his notice to move on, my dad said, here's your shot. If you want to run the business from an operations standpoint, the job's open. And, he even told me at that point in time, he said, looking back, I never had that opportunity, just because of the structure of the business. But, I was blessed with getting that opportunity, and I took it. And I've in a sense been in that position, since that day. And I basically am to this day as well too.
Yeah. So really, he sort of traded out his dad and uncle supporting him from a sales administrative standpoint for Nick's. I mean, it's a oversimplification, but that's more or less. I mean, and I share that because listeners might be like, what does a partnership like that look like? And it's like the day before we joined forces to buy the company, Parker was running the shop, and the day after he was running the shop. And we've actually really been over communicating that to the people. Like, Parker's still running the show, and it's just, he's got a different group of folks that are supporting him.
No, but that doesn't always happen, right? Like,
no, I mean, in fact, this is the first merger acquisition we've done of that sort. Usually it's the owner's exiting, and we've got to come in and either, elevate people from within or bring management in. So having this situation was very unique, and we're hopeful that we can replicate this model, in the future with other families or just other situations.
Yeah, just speak to that effect. I mean, I had to look at it from two perspectives. The most importantly is, how does the business succeed and continue? And then what do I do for my personal growth? And, and I saw this in my mind, just drumming it up before we got to the other side of this, or even knew you for that matter. It was, okay, I know how this business operates. Maybe I'm not the best at it. There's other people out there that are doing this as well, that have a platform, much like you all do, to be able to progress the business, and me as well. So then I could use my attributes as, operationally, how am I doing this? And then when we come across, hopefully, future deals, I'll be able to step into that and advise or help out on that respect, which I had no exposure to that prior to doing this deal with you guys. So it's kind of twofold, but most importantly, the succession for the business.
Yeah. I like what you said about, I had to look at, what was, I don't know exactly how you worded it, but like, look what was best for the business. I think it's important for us sometimes to separate ourselves from the business. The business is a living, breathing thing of its own. And then, we are the stewards of that, but then, so we have a personal interest. And then, we have to look out for the interest of the business, and hopefully those are aligned more often than not. But there are times where you really have to separate yourself and say, that's the business as a thing and what's right for it. And, so for example, early on, I brought my senior leadership, it's now our executive team, I brought them in as equity owners in the business. That's an uncomfortable thing to do personally, to give up some of that control and, have to manage in a much more, certainly transparent. I'm not sure what the other word I'm looking for is, but you're giving up a little bit of control, so to speak. But for me, it was like, if I just separated myself from the business and said, what is best for the business, I felt like that was the right move. And you're describing that for yourself as well. What was best for the business was to bring a partner in that could help take this thing to the next level.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I had a pro and cons list that was, if I put it up to the ceiling, it'd go through to the basement, but the pros vastly outweigh the cons. And one of the things that I didn't take off the table was, maybe I'm being pushed to walk away from this business. It comes to that level.
And
it really does.
Well, I was gonna say, sometimes you don't know. Like I was thinking, a lot of times I listen to respond because I'm a bad listener, but I'm gonna respond a little bit in the sense of our partnership is a really micro version of kind of what you guys did, because we were more of a startup partnership. But what it was I had two things. One was financially. My wife and I were like, I don't want to jump in 100% risk. And so I partnered with Nix to help with that, the financial stability there. And then two, I knew what I want. I mean, Nix don't do video. They do marketing internally, but they don't do it for businesses as agencies and stuff. So like, I knew that I could do that from a management standpoint. And what I got out of the partnership was, I remember saying, I was like, hey, I've never managed anyone. Every position I've ever had professionally, I'd never managed one. So they've helped me as I've grown my team and managing and mentorship and stuff like that. But I also thought in the back of my mind was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to run a business, cause like, and you don't know until you do it. Cause like, and I still don't know, but almost 5 years in, I have no idea if I'm doing okay. I will say this is the longest job I've ever kept. So that's good, right?
Tracking in the right direction.
Yeah. But you're both saying something similar. And that is that when it comes to the skill set and the trade, you both believed in your own abilities, but you know what you don't know. And you're saying, look, I believe in my ability to do video marketing, or I believe in my ability to run a shop floor. If I had the right partner behind me, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm betting that I can be successful. Like you said, there might be other people out there that can do it better, but I'm betting that I will be plenty successful at this.
Worst case scenario, you get pushed out in a good way, hopefully in a good way. Hopefully in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a gambling person, but with a business, calculated risk is always a thing that you have to be aware of, and it's just inherent in the process, but with Nix specifically, and this kind of progresses in towards the other side of the equation after the merger or acquisition. But I had to look at it from a standpoint of, okay, if we do this with the business and this is the person or the company that's going to acquire, what's the upside? And just like any other investment, there's two avenues to take there. You either get in low or you get in early. And with meeting with Matthew through this process, it came abundantly clear to me what their direction is. And, then you realize the scale of it. And it's like, wow, if we really do progress with this as Nix as a whole, we're getting in at the very low level, which means there's a tremendous upside to this. So, I'm trusting in that.
Hey guys, it's Nick from Making Chips, and I gotta tell you about our new show, Lights Out. When someone talks about being lights out, what comes to mind? For me, it's Michael Jordan, he's got the ball, the game's on the line, or it's Leo Messi taking that ball up to take a penalty in a penalty shootout. These guys are elite, and they're unstoppable, and you just know they're not gonna miss. But I also think about the technology, automation, process, and most importantly, the mindset of the manufacturing leaders with the best shops in the world. Every episode will equip and inspire you to run lights out so you can sleep soundly while your shop never stops. Because we all know, if you're not making chips, you're not making money. So check out the new Lights Out podcast by Making Chips. I will see you there.
it's like the pie thing that you guys talk about a lot. Like as the pie grows bigger, you took, because you could have gotten full ownership of your business, right? And you would have had the whole pie. But if you were stagnated, like you said, it may not. Like there's that potential that your slice of the pie is going to get a lot bigger, and anybody else that gets to share in that, right? And so
and so we structured the deal in a way, to be more specific about what he's referring to. We structured the deal in a way that we went together to buy his family business out, but we've got a mechanism and all the math and economics in place so that Parker has an incentive to grow that specific business, and eventually that will convert to him having a piece of the overall pie. So, I'm really big about aligned incentives. You want everyone to be rowing in one direction and be aligned to where we don't want his only interest to be his location and that's all he cares about, but also we want him to care about that location because we need it to be successful, right? And so we don't want an adversarial relationship. So he knows everything he does to drive that location, his business, and make it successful. Not only will it be successful for that location, but that's going to parlay for him into a bigger piece of the pie once we get to that transition period. And so, of course, I'm giving the really 10,000 foot view of that, but I think that's important to point out to people too.
I didn't even know that's how you guys structure. I think that's kind of cool because I think a lot of people don't know that you can do it that way too, where there's incentive for the overall business growth, not just your location.
Yeah, I think it's wise to tell people listening too. I mean, everybody thinks, okay, you buy or sell a business. Well, there's a million different ways that you can structure a deal. And a lot of people that have never been involved in this have no exposure to it, but there's solutions. I mean, no matter how big the business is, how small it is, how many players there are, it gets convoluted on paper, but there's always a solution. Yeah.
So before we switch over to how's it going now, is there any other questions, Matthew, you want to hit on about leading up to the merger or even during the, I think during is kind of also after a little bit, but.
Yeah, maybe just so once you guys made the decision that, hey, we're going to take the company to market, just kind of tell us a little bit about what was that vetting process like? Like you had someone that was helping you, which is very common, a sell side consultant, if you will. So you had a professional that was running point on this deal for you guys. Just kind of walk us through what did that process look like when you guys said, all right, we're going to do this.
I was also saying red flags, if they met with any businesses outside of Nick's, what was maybe not naming the businesses, but what was the red
that's
flags?
A good one too. Let's come to that one next. Let's start with kind of take us from the moment where the family said, all right, we're going to do this. What did that next few months look like?
It was dinner. We sat down at dinner one night with the individual you referenced was a longtime advisor of ours. One we trusted. He wasn't necessarily into brokering or selling businesses at the time, but he was going to do it as a favor, more or less. So we valued it. We looked at, what those options looked like for my dad and my uncle and if it was even viable. But it literally came down to, let's do it. And we did, and it went stagnant. It probably was stagnant for upwards of 8 months to a year even. It was kind of, we dove in and, we just let it hit a dead end road. So I poked the bear. I told my dad, what's going on with this, and he heard me, and he went back after that individual and said, we need to shake the tree here. Something needs to progress. And we did. And then we started seeing a lot of activity. And one, of course, was you all, and that was nothing more than a reference through another individual that came across your plate, and that's essentially where we got. But once we really started pushing it, or the individual we talked to is our broker per se, once he started pushing that, a lot of activity happened. So, again, it was more of a 2.5, 3 year process. The decision was made 2.5, 3 years ago. But really in the last year is when it started to progress quickly.
Yeah. So, and just so the listeners know, the way I found out about it was the broker they were working with sent it to several people, and those people that are in that space, people know people, and there's another family in our community that has bought and sold several businesses, and it came across their desk. So probably an attorney or, a advisor that they know each other sent it to them and came across their desk. And they said, well, it's not a fit for me, but I know Matthew Nix, and this looks like it might be a great fit for him, and sent it over to us, and the rest is history. So
yeah, the emotion side behind it too is that is a roller coaster. Obviously being a family business, that's understandable, but when you commit to a process like this, and it's, strung out over 2.5, 3 years. And in those last 6-8 months, it's, wow, this is real
roller coaster ride.
You're like, hang on a second. Should I pump the brakes? Get the pro con list back out, revisit that, have the conversations. And, I did my own due diligence too. I mean, I went to friends, individuals, colleagues, everybody that bought, sold, people that have built businesses and only sold businesses, and said, look at this. What do you think of it? And there was very little negative feedback. I'll put it that way.
Did we cover your question?
Basically, I'm assuming there were some other players in the game, and there was probably some red flag. Was there red flags? Because I could think our listeners might be like,
that's a good
what are some
question.
red flags that you noted, at least to you, that maybe it was just maybe it was your values or something. You're like, yeah, this one just didn't feel right. Obviously, I know the synergies between you guys, why it worked. It all makes
That's a great question, but why didn't it work?
Why didn't it work if there was other players?
Mm-hmm. There were, and again, regionally based, a lot of the interest came from the Michigan or core automotive areas in the country. And a lot of that was, people flying over from the 10,000 foot level, again, just throwing out bids and saying, we're going to gobble this guy up and use him for what he's worth. That was the feeling, and we do business with a lot of companies that have been acquired, and a lot of them are tasteless. It's just, you look at how they've changed as a customer, nothing changes. They just change ownership. There's no value increase. You don't get more business out of them. And there's nothing behind that. With the looks that we did get outside of Nix, that's what I experienced. And it was very unpersonable. It was all about numbers. It was not about relationships. And I'll say it bluntly. I told my dad, I said, if you entertain an offer from somebody of that nature, I'm not going to be a player in this deal. And my dad and my uncle both held true to that.
Yeah, that's cool.
I'm going to look at our time. We could pause here and have a second part.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be really cool, because it's shaping up to be like part one is everything pre-acquisition, and part two will be post-acquisition. So
I think it's perfect.
Can you tease a little bit about how the merger, whether it's some good, some bad? How's it gone so far?
The merger overall is better than I would have expected. Plenty of speed bumps, but yeah, it's gone very well.
That's
so
what
we can highlight some of the speed bumps in the next episode.
I wanted to put some drama in there. Yeah. So, awesome. To our listeners, you just heard us decide that this is going to be a 2-part episode or 2-part thing. So check out the second part. But if you haven't followed us or liked us, if you haven't followed us on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, I think we're on TikTok too. I don't manage that. But go ahead and follow us on there. Engage with us. It actually helps us get guests. Although, we found Parker in a different way. We've had some really good guests come on because of our social media accounts and things like that.
Yeah, we've met some really cool people, a lot of interesting stories, and that's one of my favorite parts about doing the podcast is the neat people and neat people we get to meet and interact with, and then we learn some cool stuff. So yeah, definitely reach out to us if you know somebody or you personally would like to be on an episode. And I think we need people to like and
rate, review. It's like
all the things.
Like 3 R's. All the things.
Do all the things.
Do all the things.
Yeah.
Do we do our tagline if it's a 2-parter?
Yeah. And Parker should know this well. We running a brand new Bystronic laser. Hey, Bystronic, did you hear that?
Sponsorship opportunity.
Running a new Bystronic laser, and those things are expensive, and we want to keep it running so Parker can relate to our sign off. So if you're not making sparks,
You're not making money.
boom.
We're signing paychecks for that matter.
Yeah.